We've all seen the footage of Charlie Kirk being murdered. It's very sad, it's very tragic, and it's downright depressing. I suspect that this is a very, very complex assassination that involves something more complex than just a mere angry left-wing activist. There is an interesting tweet that you can read. It is from a guy by the name of Harrison Smith. And Harrison said something not too long ago. And that is that he was told by someone close to Charlie Kirk that Charlie Kirk was afraid that Israel was going to murder him if he turned against Israel. Now, I looked into this tweet. Yes, Harrison Smith did write this. And he said, I was told by someone who was close to Charlie Kirk that Charlie Kirk is terrified of the Israelis. Now, if you look at recent videos of Charlie Kirk was very pro-Israel to the extent that he was doing apologetics for Israel's slaughterhouse in Gaza. But Charlie Kirk was vocal about Jeffrey Epstein.
That Epstein, with his little friend Ghislaine and Ghislaine's father, Robert Maxwell, who was obviously a spy of the Israeli intelligence agencies, that there was something else going on here. It's nothing new that if you're in the intel agencies, you want to try and get as much blackmail on powerful people as possible. And this is no longer just speculation. First of all, the evidence that shows that Epstein was a creation of either Mossad, Israeli intelligence, American intelligence, Saudi intelligence, or maybe he was just a hired gun. Maybe he was just the guy that countries would go to and park a couple $100 million and say, hey, can you get one of the members of the royal family with a 13-year-old so we can get them to do what we want to do? Members of Congress are actively being blackmailed. The Epstein playbook is being used on a daily basis. Jeffrey Epstein was not a financier. He was not a hedge fund manager. Jeffrey Epstein was a key player in a multi-decade blackmail operation against the most powerful people on the planet.
And he was vocal about Jeffrey Epstein's connections to the Mossad. And he said that it is no longer a conspiracy, that Epstein was working for some major intelligence apparatus. And he said, the Mossad. And then there is a video that you can watch in which Kirk is speaking with Megyn Kelly. And they're talking about Jeffrey Epstein.
Do you think there's any intel community involvement in this?
I wouldn't be surprised one bit. I am convinced, based on my own sources and my own reporting on this story, he wasn't one of ours.
So he was an American, which leads basically three options: MI6, Saudi, or Mossad.
Yep.
Which one would you choose?
I guess Mossad, given his connection to Ghislaine Maxwell.
So what does that mean?
Well, I mean, it's possible that that's the reason everything's getting buried, that there is some treasure trove, and it's getting buried because...
How many people here believe that? Raise your hand. Okay, I'd say about half the hands think that it's being buried because of an Israeli thing.
It could be. I really don't know.
And I have no evidence to suggest that.
No, me neither. I did think it was very odd how, look, half of you raised your hands because you've heard that theory, you've heard it debated, you have questions, but the one time Pam Bondi was asked a question about this at the cabinet meeting on Monday, she was like, and as for whether he was an agent, that I don't know. I haven't looked into that. I'll get back to you. You haven't looked into it? What do you mean? So that was kind of a fishy answer.
And Megan, remember Alexander Acosta in 2007, he said he was told to treat Epstein carefully because he was an intel asset. That was one of Trump's cabinet secretaries who was literally a U.S. attorney 3 hours from here in Florida. He said that himself.
Now, think about this. Think about this just for one moment. Charlie Kirk is one of the biggest things for American conservatism. He is right up there with Ben Shapiro. Arguably, he is more famous than Ben Shapiro. I think he is much more popular than Ben Shapiro. I think Ben Shapiro is on his way out. But Charlie Kirk, arguably the biggest face of American conservatives, of American conservatism right now. And he is talking about Epstein, and he's talking about Epstein's connections to the Mossad. That is very dangerous for Israel. Very dangerous for Israel. Think about this. Israel is losing the propaganda war. Israel is losing the PR war. Israel is quickly becoming more and more unpopular. Israel, since October the 7th, since Israel's bombing and slaughter of Gaza began, Israel has been sending its finest Hasbarist, its finest propagandist, to do apologetics, to do Hasbara, which is just propaganda, for Israel. And these Hasbarists, no matter how efficient they are in the art of sophistry and debate, are losing. They're losing. Israel sent its finest Hasbarist to defend it, and they've been losing. Douglas Murray, etc., whoever, they've been losing. They've been losing to comedians. They've been losing to people like Dave Smith. And Israel knows we are losing the Hasbara campaign. Israel's top spokesperson, Mr. Jonathan Conricus, has been losing debate after debate, or he got slaughtered by Mehdi Hassan. Mehdi Hassan recently just slaughtered John Conricus in a debate on the Piers Morgan show. And John Conricus himself has admitted Israel is losing the propaganda war.
I see and I agree with your point, Piers. And I think that what Israel is at fault doing is not communicating well enough and not managing the media realm of warfare in a sufficient way. And I think that is regrettable.
Netanyahu recently said that if only Israel could have 6 more Mike Huckabees, then we would be winning the Hasbara war. He said this.
If we had 5 or 6 more Mike Huckabees, Israel wouldn't have a Hasbara problem. Thank you.
So Israel knows we're losing. Now, Israel's entire existence depends on the United States. Israel knows this. The only people who don't know this are all of the Israelis and all the Zionists who are oblivious to this reality. They think that God is always going to protect Israel no matter what, and blah, blah, blah. And they just don't see the reality. Israel's whole existence depends on America. When Iran was bombing Israel, it was the United States that helped Israel. It was the United States that intercepted a lot of Iran's missiles. And even then, America could not prevent all the missiles from hitting Israel. Israel's Iron Dome was proven to be nothing but hot air. It wasn't efficient enough to defend Israel from all of these hypersonic missiles that Iran was launching at it. America gives billions of dollars to Israel every single year. They say it's $4 billion. I think it's more than that. But America gives billions of dollars every year to Israel. Israel needs that. Israel needs the protection. They need the defense. Knowing this, Israel sees what's happening. They see how more and more Americans are becoming critical of Israel. They see how they are losing the most important demographic for Israel, and that is the white demographic in the United States. The white demographic is the most important demographic for Israel because the white demographic is the majority of Americans. If you want to become president of the United States, you need to win the white vote. They talk about winning the black vote and the Hispanic vote and the Arab vote. And yeah, that's important if you have enough white votes and you need just a few more votes just to win. Yeah, the minority votes are important in that regard. But if you lose the white vote, you lose the presidential election. And if Israel loses the support of the American white demographic, Israel loses America. Because the core of the American population, the majority of the American population is white. Now, for decades, Israel has been enjoying the popularity of the majority of the white demographic, and that is because of evangelical Christianity. But if you look at the numbers in regards to popularity for Israel in the United States, we've been seeing it going down. Israel doesn't really care about being popular amongst African Americans because black people have tended to be critical of Israel. Hispanics are a mixed bag because of Hispanics becoming evangelical and all that. You have a substantial amount of Hispanics being pro-Israel, but it's a mixed bag. Israel's not too worried about them. Arabs, Israel never had them in the first place, so they don't matter. But white people, they matter for Israel. If you look at what the Pew Research Center has shown recently, if you take the totality of the American Republicans, yeah, the majority of Republicans are pro-Israel. All right, over 50% of Republicans in America are pro-Israel. But if you look at Republicans who are under the age
of 50,
the majority of those Republicans are critical of Israel. And they are the future of the Republican Party. The future of the Republican Party belongs to the youth, just like any other future, right? The future of any population belongs to the youth. The boomers are old. They're dying out. What happens when the millennials take over the Republican Party? What happens when the Zoomers take over the Republican Party? That's what Israel is worried about. So they see Charlie Kirk. He represents what? He represents the future of the Republican Party. He represents the young Republican population. And they see Charlie Kirk supporting Israel for the most part. He's giving apologetics for Israel's slaughterhouse in Gaza. That's all well and good for Israel. But then they see Charlie Kirk talking about Epstein and how Epstein was a Mossad asset and how Epstein was being used to gather blackmail against America's politicians. And what does that lead people to? Charlie Kirk has a massive following. Millions of people are listening to Charlie Kirk. People are watching Charlie Kirk. Young Republicans, mainly young white Republicans, are listening to Charlie Kirk. And they're hearing Charlie Kirk talking about Epstein and Israel and the Mossad. And what is that going to lead them? That's an entire gateway into an even deeper rabbit hole. They start going on to Twitter. They start looking more into Epstein. They start reading about the Mossad, blackmailing America's politicians. Then they start looking at Candace Owens. Then they start looking at Nick Fuentes. And they're going down that rabbit hole. They start looking at the Israel lobby. They start looking at John Mearsheimer, the Israel lobby, how Israel is controlling over our politicians. And what conclusion would that lead a young person to? What conclusion does that lead us to? Israel has a lot of undue influence. Israel has a lot of undue excessive power over our government. That's not good. And they become critical of Israel. And that could lead to other conclusions. That could lead to the conclusion that Israel is doing genocide. That could lead to the conclusion that, oh my God, our tax dollars are funding a genocide. That's evil. And that could all start with just someone being told about Jeffrey Epstein and his connections to the Mossad. That's very dangerous. Plus, also keep in mind, Charlie Kirk, being as popular as he was also someone who insiders could leak information to. Someone who is close to Israel, who knows too much about Israel, but is critical of Israel, could leak information to Charlie Kirk. That's another dangerous prospect for Israel. Israel is very desperate. They are very desperate. They're losing the propaganda campaign. Doesn't matter who they send to do Hasbara for them, they're losing. It's a battle that Israel cannot win. And when evil people become desperate, they do evil things. When someone is money hungry and they're power hungry and they're going to lose a bunch of money, what do? They do evil things. It's like someone who is money hungry and he wants to get a family member's inheritance. He does something very destructive and evil. That's the type of situation I think that Israel is in. So imagine, you're Israel. Your entire existence, your survival depends on America. And you are watching the rapid shift taking place in the American young population. And that shift is not in your favor, it's against you. Israel starts to get desperate. What do? Charlie Kirk is our guy, right? Charlie Kirk is Israel's guy. He's defending Israel, all this stuff. But he starts talking about Epstein. That's dangerous. So here are my thoughts on this. This is what I think happened. And this is just me speculating and pontificating. But I think that Israel decided to hit two birds with one stone. Charlie Kirk is talking too much about Epstein. He's really no longer on our side at this point, because when it comes to the Israel lobby, the Zionists, just 1 ounce of criticism is not tolerated. They get rid of Charlie Kirk because he's leading people down a rabbit hole that leads people to the conclusion that Israel is not really our friend. And they get the right wing angry, and they get the right wing to react against the left. If you go onto X right now, it is filled, I mean filled to the brim, with reaction videos. People getting mad, they're saying F the left did this, it's the woke. This is exactly the reaction that Israel wants. Well, how do you know that? Obviously. Do you think Israel wants people to join the left? Because if you join the left, if you join the liberals, that means there's a much higher chance of you joining the Free Palestine crowd. They want people to join the pro-Israel Republican crowd. That's what they want. Because as long as people are in that paradigm, then they guarantee that they're going to have a bunch of pro-Israel Americans, and that's what they want. If they lose the white demographic, it's over for Israel. It's over. They cannot afford to lose the white demographic, because the white demographic are the majority of Americans. You lose the majority of Americans, then politicians are no longer going to see an incentive to be pro-Israel. They're going to say, well, being pro-Israel loses me votes. I shouldn't be pro-Israel. And that would incentivize more and more politicians to be either indifferent or critical of Israel, because it would no longer be politically advantageous to be pro-Israel. That's what Israel's afraid of, because that would lead to a shift in policy against Israel. They don't want that. So what do? I think that, this is just me speculating, but Israel decided to hit two birds with one stone. You get rid of Charlie Kirk as a potential threat to the pro-Israel narrative. Secondly, you get the right to be enraged against the left. And that rage against the left means rage against people who are pro-Palestine. Because if you can get more and more people just angry with the left, then guess what? You can increase the possibility of people being distracted from the Jeffrey Epstein situation, distracted from what Israel is doing, distracted from the recent story that took place in Vegas, in which you had an Israeli pedophile by the name of Artyom Alexandrovich, who was arrested, and he went back to Israel because it turns out he is a high-ranking official for Israel's cybersecurity in the Netanyahu government. And that was getting a lot of attention. That meant Israel getting a lot of negative attention. That meant a lot of white folks getting angry with Israel. That's a huge threat to the Israelis. That's something the Israelis do not want. So then what do? Charlie Kirk gets assassinated. Huge amounts of attention are now on what? Not on Artyom Alexandrovich, not on AIPAC, not on Epstein, not on that whole situation. The attention is on the left. The negative attention is on the liberals. And where do the pro-Palestinian people tend to congregate in? They tend to congregate in liberal circles. That means negative attention being diverted towards the people who are hosting the most anti-Israel sentiments. That's the liberals. That's the left. This is what they're hoping for. This is my speculation. They're desperate. They're terrified of white Americans becoming more and more critical of Israel. So what do? Charlie Kirk, the face of American conservatism, the face of the future of the Republican Party, he gets killed. People get angry. They lash out. At who? Not Israel, the liberals. This is what Israel wants. This is what Israel wants. Now you could say, well, Ted, what's the proof? I know for a fact that this is what Israel wants. You think Israel wants people to become a bunch of Norman Finkelstein followers? No, they want people to become, hoorah, American, let's go to war in the Middle East type of people. That's what they want. It's very obvious. And so the reaction that you're seeing is what the Israelis want. That's what Israel wants. Israel doesn't want people getting angry about Artem Alexandrovich. They don't want people getting angry about Epstein. They don't want people getting angry about any of that stuff. They want people getting angry about the liberals, the people who are the most sympathetic to the Palestinian cause. That's what they want. And they want to use the American right as a proxy against the pro-Palestine liberal movement. That's what these people want. It's very obvious. It is very obvious. The thing is this plan going to work? I don't think so. I think, yeah, there's a lot of rage against the left. Absolutely. But people haven't forgotten about Epstein. People haven't forgotten about Artem Alexandrovich. People haven't forgotten about this stuff. People aren't forgetting about AIPAC. They're not forgetting about the pro-Israel lobby. And if you go on X, there's a bunch of people saying that obviously the Mossad did this. Obviously this is Israel. So no matter what Israel does, people are still going to hate on Israel. They're still going to be critical of Israel. The anti-Israel train has been set. It's going to keep on going. It's not going to stop. Once people figured out AIPAC, once they figured out the Israel lobby, once they figured out Epstein, once they figured out all this stuff, they're not just going to go, oh yeah, well, there was this assassination and so now I'm going to become pro-Israel. That's not what's going to happen. The anti-Israel stuff is going to continue to intensify. Anyway, those are my thoughts on that. You guys just heard some theology. God bless.